Courtroom was full today as Maine's highest court heard oral arguments from attorneys appearing on behalf of survivors of childhood sexual assault.
Maine Supreme Court justices heard arguments regarding the constitutionality of a law that removed the statute of limitations for adults who survived childhood sexual abuse to come forward and sue their abusers.
Today's hearing focusing on cases involving the Maine Catholic Diocese. The court discussed if the law is constitutional and if it applies to organizations.
An attorney representing more than a dozen survivors argued the law supports applying a statute passed by the legislature in 2021 that repeals time limits for when survivors could bring suit. He says studies show on average survivors of childhood sexual abuse often do not come forward until age 52.
He says the new law allows victims to come forward when they feel safe and ready. The attorney representing the Maine Catholic Diocese argued that since the legislature has been in session, it's unclear if they're allowed to write this new law.
In 200 years, the legislature has respected the Constitution and has never once tried this. This is the first time.
And when you say there's never been a holding such as suggested, that means in this state, because we've not decided the question.
Well, it has never arisen because the legislature never retroactively abolished the statute of limitations and reimposed the potential liability.
This was a very important day in the litigation, and we're very grateful that so many people could travel so far for an important issue that they care so much about.
The Supreme Court says they're taking the case under advisement.